for all of you, and I'll start this now. And finally, with the generous support of a grant from the Ministry of Economics and International Development of Germany, we are able to hire the services of French interpreters for today's meeting. And so in consideration of the interpreters, we ask that if you do speak, you please speak slowly so that they're able to accurately translate all the things that you're saying. Another final reminder is that our first session tomorrow morning will be the launch of the UNICEF Global Report on Children with Disabilities. And you do have to register separately for that event. And so one of my colleagues will now be placing in the chat the link so that you may register for that event. That event will start at 8 o'clock in the morning, Eastern Standard Time, and go until 9:30 in the morning. In the interest of time and of the things that we want to accomplish in our meeting, regardless of how long the UNICEF event goes, we will begin the Washington Group session meetings again at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time sharp. So without further ado, I will now like to give the floor to Jaliswan Mase from Statistics South Africa, who will be moderating our first session this morning, which is on a topic that is of great interest to a lot of us, which is the use of the Washington Group tools in administrative records. Jaliswa, over to you.
Thank you, Hari. Good morning and good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Jaliswa Ndamase, as Hari has rightfully introduced me. I'm not sure whether would you want me to turn on the camera, but I'm trying to save my battery. We have a marathon of load shedding in South Africa, so I'm trying to save my battery so that I can finish the session. Otherwise, I'm going to be moderating a session on the use of the Washington Group instruments in administrative records. I work for Statistics South Africa, and I am in South Africa. So we're going to be having 3 presentations for this session, and our presenters will be sharing their experiences on the use of the Washington Group instruments in gathering information on disability, and obviously in different types of administrative data sources. So we're going to be learning from these countries. I think it's South Africa, Costa Rica, and Rwanda. So I hope in this session, we're going to be much more interactive, because I understand as countries, we're moving more towards embracing the use of administrative data sources nowadays to complement our censuses and also our surveys. So hopefully we're going to learn from each other. We're going to learn from the experiences of these 3 countries, and even other countries who are not really presenting today, but I'm sure there is work that is currently being done in their own respective countries. So when we come together, sharing those experiences and also trying to improve on what has been done by other countries, so we can come out even much more stronger in actually exploring this space of administrative data sources. So each presenter is going to be having 15 minutes, and after that 15 minutes, we're going to open the floor for questions and any other clarity that might be required. However, if you feel that you want to ask a question and you can't hold on to that question until the end, you feel that you might even forget about it, you're more than welcome to type it up on the chat box, and the Secretariat, we're going to keep tabs on everything that you're typing on the chat box, and it's going to be read out to the presenter after the presentation. And if you do want to pose the question yourself, you're more than welcome to raise your hand at the end of the presentation. So without wasting any further time, I'm going to call upon our first presenter, Dan, to take over. Over to you, Dan. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here to talk with you. about this Minister of Data, which we talked about a lot in the past few meetings, but I think finally we're starting to make some progress on this. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it there.
Okay, great. So what I'm talking about today is on creating a harmonized disability data systems, and the example from South Africa, which is the country where I think it is the furthest ahead in trying to think about this. What do we mean by data harmonization? Well, we mean having all the different various data sets being able to take enough of a common approach so that the data can be used together and understood together. Why do we want to harmonize data? Well, one reason is, one source might say the prevalence rate is 2%, another source says it's 10%. Who's right? There's a lot of confusion. People get upset. They think we don't know what we're talking about. And we want to have a really clear idea if there are different rates of prevalence coming from different departments. Is that because of they're using a different threshold? Is it because they're using different methodologies? How do they relate to each other? And we want to be able to use these data sources together, right? So that they give us more power. For example, how are people who are not applying for disability benefits different from the ones who are? Right? We're getting administrative data on people applying for disability benefits month to month to month. We're getting data from a census or a household survey, every few years. What do we know about the people who are getting disability benefits in relation to what we know about people who are identified by having a disability in our survey instruments? Well, if they're using two different methods, we can't really understand that relationship. What if we want to know about children with disabilities' lives? Well, we have a lot of information from household surveys. We have a lot of information about what goes on in schools from the Education Management Information System. But again, if those surveys and that EMIS, the Education Management Information System, are using different ways of identifying children with disabilities, we can't use those two data sources together in a meaningful way. So what are the challenges in order to try to harmonize disability data from different sources? Well, first, disability is complex, multidimensional. That's not something I have to explain to this group. Agencies lack a uniform definition of disability and a way of collecting disability data. The Ministry of Social Welfare, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Labor, the National Census, they may not all be identifying people with disabilities in the same way. And one reason for that is they have different purposes of disability data collection. So they might actually have legitimately be trying to identify different subpopulations, let's say, of the overall people with disabilities. And finally, there's limitations in the number and type of questions that can be asked, right? In a census, we only have 6 questions. And household survey, we can have a lot more. What about on an intake form in an administrative setting? Again, how many questions do you have? What type of questions can you ask or appropriate to ask in different settings may be different. And that also poses a challenge for us in trying to figure out how we can harmonize the data collection across all these ministries. Now, one question that people first ask when you talk about harmonizing disability data collection is, does every department have to collect data the exact same way? Well, first, in trying to think through this, we have to recognize that each department has different needs. Some programs identify the eligibility for benefits according to people's ability to work. Now, I think that's a really bad way of having a social protection program, but that's for a different presentation. But there are some data collections that are doing that. And at the same time, there are data collections that are looking at employment quotas. Now, you can see right away, these two things are completely at odds. One person is defining disability as the inability to work. The other person is saying, we want to know which people have disabilities who are working. Cash benefits directed at the extra costs of disability you might be trying to, the people who need those kinds of things might be a somewhat different population than the people who you want to, say, address with inclusive services, let's say inclusive education. You're trying to identify every child who might have some difficulty that puts them at risk of not learning. That could be a different population than the children who have support needs that require extra costs. And also each department has different resources for data collection, right? You might be having a national disability survey. You can ask dozens of questions. Other people are collecting information on intake forms. Those intake forms, can't be too long. And also, people might balk or hesitate. Why are you asking me questions about whether I have difficulty seeing or hearing? I'm applying for a marriage license, So what's appropriate? And then, of course, there's disability assessments, which, if done right, collect a lot more information than the full-length surveys in terms of what people's support needs are and what their functional limitations are. So it could be in the end that not everybody is collecting data in the same way, but we still want to be able to harmonize this data as much as possible. So what's the framework that we can use for harmonizing data? Well, it's clear, and again, I don't have to talk much about this with this group, that we want to move towards a more functional definition of disability, a more functional way of identifying people with disabilities. And that's what the Washington Group questions, as you know, try to do. They try to identify people who, because of functional limitations, are at risk because of barriers in the environment of exclusion, right? That's the big population that we're interested in, and different departments may be trying to identify different subpopulations or parts of that population. Now, this is the approach that's used in the Washington Group questions, recommended by the UN Stats Division for censuses, and it is the approach that's used in Stats South Africa for their statistical data collection. So the goal, again, is to create a bridge between all the data sets. We want to create a core set of information that's common to all data sets, so that we can have a better understanding of how people identified as having a disability from one data source relate to people identified by other data sources. And we want to do that for statistical data and administrative data. We want those two types of data to be able to work together. Okay. One of the challenges, another challenge yet, is the difference between disability identification and eligibility determination. Okay, for CRPD compliance, for disaggregating the SDGs, again, we want to identify, as I just said, everyone who's at risk of exclusion. But for eligibility determination, we're identifying people who meet a programmatic definition aligned with a specific purpose. And that may not be all of those people. And then finally, there are some departments or ministries that are identifying people with disabilities just by asking them if they have a disability. And again, we know that greatly under-identifies people. I don't have to go into much of that. So there's different approaches for identifying people, and they're going to identify different groups of people. Okay, not everyone identified by the Washington Group is going to qualify for disability benefits, or receive disability benefits, I should say. Not everybody receiving disability benefits is going to be identified by the Washington Group questions. And then there are the people who are identified by, do you have a disability? That's going to be a smaller group of people. And again, these three circles are not going to completely overlap. And these are not drawn to scale. This is just to give an idea. I'm not saying this is the, shouldn't take these size of these circles literally. Okay. So why don't we expect a complete overlap of the Washington Group and people getting a disability grant? Well, first of all, people might be getting a disability grant, but not be identified by the Washington Group. Why? Well, we know psychosocial conditions, for example, are missed a lot with the Washington Group short set. Other conditions that are sometimes related to chronic medical conditions, people may not be having functional difficulties at the moment, but they might qualify for the grant because in some countries, it's perceived as, oh, if you have these chronic medical conditions, you're at high risk of having lots of health costs, so we're going to cover those health costs through this program. So there's reasons why people without functional difficulties might qualify for these disability grants. Also, the disability grant program might use a threshold that's different than a lot of difficulty, at least for certain functional domains. And of course, there's always, false negative errors. And then people might be identified by the Washington group, but not get disability grants. Why? They may not know about the disability grant program and know how to access it. It might be inaccessible to them. They may not self-identify as having a disability. They might be concerned about stigma, or they just don't want to see themselves that way. They might be elderly and be receiving old age benefits. In many countries, old age benefits are better than disability benefits. So why should I get a disability grant if I'm getting an old age grant? They may not qualify as having a disability under the disability grant procedure. So there's not going to be that complete overlap. Let's see. Okay, so how do we go about trying to look at these things in South Africa? I was fortunate enough to be a consultant and work with the great South Africa team there, trying to figure out how we can start moving in this direction. Well, we went and reviewed all the questionnaires and administrative forms that we could get from the different ministries to see how data was being collected. And then we went around and talked to as many departments as we could and asked them, are you collecting data on disability? Why are you collecting it? That's really important. What's the purpose of the data collection? How are they collecting it? How do they intend to use it? And if they're not collecting it, what data tools do they use right now where we could add questions on disability? And we also looked at a study, did a study on how new disability benefit recipients answer the Washington group questions. As you know, the Washington group questions can't be used as eligibility determination. We've been through that with this group many times before. So the key is to understand the relationship between the Washington group and the people getting the disability grant, so we can use those data sources together. So we were able to look at people who were receiving the grant to see how many of them were identified by the Washington group questions. And for the adults, you can see that 62.5% of the people being awarded a disability grant would have been picked up by the Washington group short set. If we add in anxiety, depression, it goes up. If we add in pain and fatigue, if we add in the other extended set questions, it goes up. If we add in pain and fatigue, we use everything, it goes up to about 76, 77%. We weren't able to do it the other way. How many people identified by the Washington group questions get disability grants because we just didn't have the time, logistically. We were only able to go in this direction. But you can see there's a fairly big overlap, but not near total. Now for children, the CARES grant, which goes to CARES of children with disabilities, it actually was much higher, went all the way up to 90%. And at first I was confused because I said, wait, we know that the Washington group short set and extended set under-identified children with disabilities. So why is this better? And then I realized, well, if you're a child getting the disability grant, you'll probably have more severe disabilities. And therefore, you're probably more likely to be picked up by the Washington short set because of that severity. We can talk more about this. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go on. You can see there was a lot of overlap. So the recommendations for SASSA, the South Africa Social Security Administration, was they should record the level of difficulties in the Washington group functional domains. They were collecting, obviously, a lot of information about the people's functioning. And they should keep them attached to the individual records, because right now in South Africa, they collect that information to make the eligibility determination, but then they don't keep the information. They only keep the level of disability and the medical condition. So we don't want them to throw away that functional information that they're using in the eligibility determination process. And we want them to map it onto the Washington group functional domains and use those when they're making their reports. So what is the state overall? When we looked at all these departments, they kind of fell into three groups. There were those that are already collecting functional information. For example, the Department of Basic and also High Education, we're collecting a lot of functional information. There were others that were using the "Do you have a disability?" For example, the Department of Labor for looking at employment quotas. And then there were also departments that really seemed like there was a need for collecting disability data, but they weren't doing it. And so we make recommendations of how they could do that. So for group one, we recommended that those departments already collecting functional information, again, try to map it onto the same domains as the Washington Group questions. Even if they didn't want to use the Washington Group questions, they still have the same functional domains. Hopefully they would use the Washington Group questions as well. Answers to questions already asked, and then all records should have information on the Washington Group domain. They should, whenever they make the reports, they should report them relative to those domains. For group two, it was not practical to have all these administrative forms replace the "do you have a disability" question with the Washington Group questions for a variety of reasons. There was objections to that. So we said, okay, well, the people who are self-identifying as having a disability, those people who are checking the box, "I have a disability," at least ask them the Washington Group questions. Therefore, we can see how that population of people with disabilities compares to the overall population of people with disabilities being identified by other instruments. So we can say, oh, do they seem to have the same types of functional difficulties as people in general, or is it skewed in some direction? And that could help give us information about what's going on with people who are identified, say, for the employment quota purposes. And then there was group three. There was Department of Social Development, the South Africa Police Service, where we felt they really could expand, and we recommended expanding the data. The South Africa Police Service, for example, really, for them, a high priority was people with mental health conditions, both as the victims of crime and as perpetrators of crime. And we talked about that. Department of Health obviously was collecting a lot of information relevant to functional limitations, functional difficulties, but it was kind of written in their sort of notes about the person's condition. And we said, well, your form should add a checklist of the Washington functional domains. So it was easy to say, okay, this person has a lot of difficulty walking, seeing, or whatever, and sort of summarize that in a checklist so that we can compare the Department of Health information to the other. And that wouldn't be much of a burden because they're already collecting so much. It's just a little checklist at the end. So the results of our recommendations were that if we went in this direction, we will move all disability data reporting towards that functional limitation approach. And we try to recommend it in a way that would minimize that extra data collection burden. But if they all did this, it would allow disability data from each source to be compared relative to the Washington Group domains, reducing that confusion and enabling us to use the data sources together, right? The ability to understand how the various populations of people identified as having a disability relate to each other. So it was a really interesting project, and hopefully something movement will come out of this to try to move in this direction. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Dan. And we're gonna open the floor for questions or any clarity that might be needed from the floor. Heidi, do we have any questions from the chat box?
Jaliswa, no, it doesn't seem as we do. And the next presentation, oh, actually, someone is raising their hand. Bethany Brown, please go ahead.
Oh, yes, Bethany, go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation, Dan. I was wondering if you could possibly go back to the slide with the concentric circles for a moment, because I think that is, it explains so much in such a great image. And it's one of those things that really helps, I think really helps explain what the difference is for the Washington Group versus how this data can be used and is being collected. And I'm just going to screenshot it now for my own edification. Thank you very much. Where did you come up with that?
Well, I mean, in looking at, well, people always are concerned about who's identified by the Washington Group who has a disability certification, you know, and why are they different? Why aren't they the same? How can you say that there's 15% of the world has a disability, but only 2% of the people are receiving disability benefits? Does that mean that we're missing 13% or not? And this is one of the first things when you go into a country to talk about harmonization that they're concerned about. Are you going to greatly increase the number of people we need to give benefits to?
We're terrified.
You know, or you're right, they're terrified by it. And we're going to say, well, no, we have different groups of people, so it's just a little diagram trying to show that you get different people when you try to identify people in different ways, and they could overlap by more or less for various reasons.
Thank you so much. It's brilliant.
Thank you, Bethany. Thank you, Dan. I believe we don't have any more questions. That means your presentation was crystal clear, Dan. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Colleagues, we're going to move on to the next presentation that is going to be given by Sofia Mora and Jose Blanco from the National Institute of Statistics and Census and National Council of Persons with Disability from Costa Rica. So their presentation will mainly be centered around the use of the Washington Group set of questions in administrative records. We're going to hear more about their own experiences. Over to you, Sophia.
So, Jaliswa, the colleagues from Costa Rica have actually asked that I share their presentation, which I will do now. And just to let everyone know that they will be speaking in Spanish, but the presentation has subtitles in English.
All right, go ahead. Heidi, can I interrupt a bit? There's no sound.
Thank you very much for that. How about now?
We can hear you, but as soon as the presenter starts, we can't hear anything.
Okay, let me try 1 second. Can you hear?
No, we still can't hear him, but we can hear you.
Okay, then I think our colleagues from Costa Rica are here, so I'm going to ask them if they can present the video.
All right.
Sophia or Jose, if you could please show the video on your end because they can't hear the audio.
They have to be a host in order for us to hear the audio.
Yeah, that's okay. They are, everyone who's presenting has that capability, but if I'm showing the video and you can't hear it, then there's...
Yes, I can share the video.
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Sophia.
Okay.
You can share your screen. Let me stop sharing right now.
Heidi, are we winning? Can we perhaps move over to Rwanda while we're still trying to figure this one out?
That sounds great, Jaliswa.
Tengan todos muy buenos días.
Okay, here we go.
Queremos iniciar agradeciendo al Grupo de Washington la oportunidad de presentarles un poco del trabajo que hemos venido realizando en Costa Rica con el propósito de poder disponer de datos que nos permitan medir el cumplimiento de los derechos de las personas con discapacidad estipulados en la Convención de Derechos de las Personas con Discapacidad, y a partir de ahí formular políticas públicas adecuadas para que estos derechos sean una realidad para esta población. Ante la carencia de datos de calidad sobre la población con discapacidad y sobre el nivel de cumplimiento de sus derechos, entre los años 2015 y 2016, el Consejo Nacional de Personas con Discapacidad, con el apoyo del Instituto Nacional de Estadística y Censos y el Ministerio de Planificación y Política Económica, formuló el proyecto Sistema Costarricense de Información sobre Discapacidad, SICID, el cual se ejecutó entre los años 2017 y 2021, y a partir de ahora está iniciando su etapa de operación. Este sistema se constituye en la plataforma oficial de coordinación y vinculación institucional y articulación del Estado costarricense para facilitar la gestión y distribución del conocimiento de la información nacional sobre discapacidad y sobre los derechos de las personas con discapacidad. El proyecto SICID se crea justamente por la escasa información de calidad, confiable, comparable y sistemática sobre el estado de los derechos de las personas con discapacidad, lo que tenía como consecuencia la exclusión de la discapacidad en los sistemas de información y en la investigación académica, entre otros. Así también, el SICID se formuló para disponer de información para elaborar políticas públicas informadas, justificar la dotación de recursos públicos, evaluar el cumplimiento de las obligaciones del Estado costarricense con relación a los derechos de las personas con discapacidad,
Sophia,
y para rendir cuentas sobre los resultados de las acciones del...
We can't see it. So, as Jaliswa said, maybe let's move on to Rwanda, and you and I can work to see how we can get this to work again on Zoom.
Yes, I think we should go ahead with that suggestion, Heidi, because right now we can't even see the subtitles. We're just hearing him and there's no presentation that is shown. Perhaps let's just move over to Rwanda. Rwanda, are we ready?
Good. Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, thank you so much, Frank. Rwanda is going to be giving us presentation on their disability identification, registry, and case management, which is a digital transformation tool for an inclusive Rwanda. So we're going to hear about their own experiences and learn from them, hopefully, and we're also going to have some questions and clarity-seeking questions at the end of his presentation. Over to you, Sam.
Yes, thank you. Please, do you see my screen?
We can see you, but we don't see your presentation.
Okay, we don't see the presentation. Oh, sorry for that. Let me see how it works. Now it should work. Do we see it now?
Yes, we can see it now. We can see it. Thank you, sir. You can go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Xolispa. Greetings from Kigali. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Fried Lambrecht. I work as a DIZ Development Advisor for the National Council of Persons with Disabilities in Rwanda. And I'm pleased to present our new feature in Rwanda, although it's still in the draft phase. But I'll share you our experiences. So if we look at the disability issues in Rwanda, we see there's a lack of disability data, although the UN CRPD was already rectified it some years ago. Children with disabilities under 5 years are not captured in the data collection, and identification is still based on a medical model and was only done once in 2014. And there is still lack of knowledge about different barriers and needs of persons with disability. And there is lack of support to persons with disability who are the most in need, which should be focused on in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, leaving no one behind and focus on the most who are in need. There is also absence of use of the international validated instruments, such as the Washington Group questions. And there is absence of link between identification and the social support system in Rwanda. Here you see somehow the structure of the DMIS in Rwanda, which is comprising of 3 components. It will say something about the digital limitation profile, which is an online profile of all the limitations persons with disability which they face. We have interactive dashboards for identification and for information, and we will have case management support for the most in need. Now I focus a bit, and we focus on, first of all, on the disability questionnaire and the registry, as you see here on the screen. So the DMIS questionnaire, the Disability Management Information System, has already approximately 300 questions. It comprises questions from the Washington Group, the short set on functioning, the extended set for all 3 age groups, from 2 to 4, from 5 to 17, and from 18 and above. It's included the labor force survey module, the UNICEF inclusive education module, although it's still draft, out of school and in school section, and some psychosocial questions, although this is still in a testing phase. Other questions in our questionnaire comes from the disability assessment tool WODAS from WHO, from the model disability survey from WHO, the community-based rehabilitation / inclusive development, the RATA rapid assessment, assistive technology assessment, and the Rwanda developmental milestones assessment tool. So it's a whole set of tools we are using in our questionnaire. If you look at the content, first of all, we will focus on socio-demographic information, and the second part will be the Washington Group, including the short and extended sets and the Washington Group children questions. First group of questions is about assistive devices, personal assistance, and the school environment. And the fourth is about the barriers and the unmet needs and priorities based on community-based rehabilitation areas. And here you see the framework of the questionnaire. If we focus on the first one, you see already when it's all about demographics, where do they live in Rwanda, in all the 30 districts, what kind of Ububere system they have, is a kind of social support system, what are their aids, what is their background in health, education, and so on. The second group I mentioned already, it's about the Washington Group for adults about 18 years and older. As you see, not only the short set, but also upper body affects, fatigue, and pain, including psychosocial questions. And then we have 3 groups of questions for children below 2 years. It's only about developmental milestones, an easy tool for parents themselves. Then we have children, the Washington Group for 16 questions for children between 3 and 5 years, although it should be 3 and 4 years. And then we have children from 5 to 17 years. And then I mentioned already, we have this set of questions, some additional questions about assistive devices. Do you have personal assistance and where do they come from? Do you have a need in this? What is the cause and the level of limitations? Even in Rwanda, it's important to have a question about short stature and albinism, because still there is a lot of stigma and discrimination. We will ask about environment and well-being. And then, very interesting also, this new in-school environment and out-of-school environment for children between 6 and 12 years. And then the last set of questions, it's all about questions we copied from the community-based rehabilitation areas, health rehabilitation, education, livelihood and employment, social life, and empowerment. So here you see the whole structure of this, this questionnaire. But of course, we won't ask all these questions for all persons with disability. It depends on the limitation level that you have. It depends on do we have some difficulties or a lot of difficulties, because then we ask more questions. So if that was the first part of our structure of the DMIS, the registry, now we focus a bit about the digital limitation profile. So we won't give persons disability ID cards, but we will give them a digital limitation profile. They could easily access them individually on this DMIS. If they don't have a smartphone, they could also use this USSD. And they could print if they like and could take it at home. But as you can imagine, we have 3 groups of limitation profiles for age groups of 2 to 4 years, from 5 to 17 years, and 18 years and above. And we have discussed what are the most important things. And you may wonder or not wonder, we focus on, of course, the short set of questions. And then we will include also upper body, but also anxiety, depression, pain, and fatigue. And also albinism and short stature. We won't talk about a disability profile anymore. We won't talk about disability degree anymore, because it's a really difficult concept. As we heard from Dan, we focus on limitation. And then, of course, in the end, you could discuss who is eligible for some profits. But here on the left side, you see the Kinyarwanda, the local language we have in Rwanda, and on the right side, we see the difficulties people face. And we want to identify all persons with disability in Rwanda, no matter where they are. The nice thing is Rwanda is a small country, so there's still a possibility to do this in a coming couple of years. So that's the first part, is a digital limitation profile, which is especially important for individual persons with disabilities, including, of course, health centers, or maybe in the future for disability grants, this kind of things. The next part is about interactive dashboards, because if you have this sets of data on a shelf, no one will look at it. I've seen them many times before, everywhere around the world, and therefore it's important to have really online direct information. That's why we have this type of dashboards. So here you see on top, for example, this is the age groups for 18 years and above. So, and you see already all the short set of questions, and we have added also the extended set of questions. And you can easily click on Rwanda as a whole. You could have slides on age groups, and it's all linked to each other. So if, for example, we click on people who are blind, which is black, with seeing, then immediately you see where are they living in Rwanda, do they have a job, what kind of status they are, all kind of things. And it's even linked with other types of limitations, because as we know, if you have seeing difficulties, probably you have also some difficulties with walking and climbing, this kind of things. But you could easily also click not only on the Rwanda map as a whole, but also on a district. Here, for example, we have the district of Kasabo, and here we focus on age groups 5 to 17 years. And as you see here, it's also important to have some indicators about upper body, playing, making friends, all kind of things. But also about, for example, what kind of assistive devices they use, you see here, but also what they need. And then you see this kind of caps. Of course, we are still in the modus of making this real working, this disability dashboards, but we are trying, and we are quite satisfied until now. And you can even focus on not only on districts, but also on sector level. And then, for example, we ask them about the reasons why you don't have health services. Do you have medication, or are you satisfied with your health? So this is kind of interactive dashboards. So there is no need to make real thick reports for OPDs or for development partners, for the ministries, because many times, as I've noticed, Also in Rwanda, people won't read this documentation, and after 1 year, it's all old. So it's not up to date anymore, and this is real-time up to date. So this was the second part, with the interactive dashboards, and then we will focus also on case management support. Because if you raise expectations, if you want to identify all persons with disability in Rwanda, then you should also offer some support for the most in need. And it's a way to support persons with disability to receive the necessary services and improve the well-being. A case manager will not provide disability services itself, but will support, but will not take over the responsibilities of an individual person with disability. The case manager will assist in the assessment, the planning, referral, and monitoring of the services, and is available for the most in need. And through a ticking system, we could select in the disability registry who is eligible for this case management. You could even focus, you want to focus on a certain area which is very poor in Rwanda, for example. And here you see the framework of this case management tool. On top, you see the 4 stages. So you identify the vulnerability through the questionnaire. You, together with your person with disability, you propose some action. You support the referral, and you monitor the progress. But we will receive the information from the DMIS. So we go to a household level in every village in the coming years, and we will identify as many as persons with disability and put them in the database. So we have already some basic information for the case management individual support plan. And we will make use of the needs of this disability management information questionnaire, and we will refer persons to, for example, health and rehabilitation. It could be education or livelihood, or either and all the actors in social life, for example, but also empowerment and for others. It's all related to community-based inclusive development. So this is, and then of course we will have some dashboards as well. And the main idea is to make a kind of a DMIS individual support plan for those who are most in need. This you can't read. I will focus a bit. On top you see in blue all the information collected already from the database, from the questionnaire. And then we will ask also in the questionnaire, what is your type of needs? Is this a high priority, a medium priority, or a low priority? And immediately, of course, we will focus on those actions who have a high priority, because we can't solve all the problems at once. And also this kind of monitoring and evaluation system will grow through these dashboards. So not only on health and rehabilitation, we have some proposed actions, and the case manager should choose, although there's always a possibility to add some additional. But for many difficulties, we have already this referral pathway. So we know already what is needed. So we will make use of it, and we put them in the system. And here, for example, you see needs in education, but also needs in livelihood and employment. And it could be either in social life and empowerment. And then, of course, the whole idea is that we make a kind of a disability management information system. So my own organization, the National Council of Persons with Disability, could log in to have full access. Then we will have some disability information, some general information. The individual person with disability could log in through the smartphone, through computers, laptops, or through the USSD with some basic information. And we have the general login for all the dashboards for development partners, ministries, or for OPDs. So this is in a nutshell the idea about our system. We are now, the IT organization is now developing this. And next week we will have our first presentation. So we think after the kickoff in next year, we will start a pilot, and then we will do this full identification, registry and support for persons with disability in Rwanda. So and if you look at the benefits and the features, so it's an on-demand identification and registry, real-time dashboards and maps, case management support for the most in need, a link to databases including social support of all the other ministries, individual check of the limitation status, grievance and appeal system if they don't agree about their status. Then they will give limitation profile for possible benefits for the future, disability information for research purposes, because you can easily download all the data into Excel or other extensions which you like. It's mapping of local OPD members. Of course, we will ask persons with disability if they allow us to share this information, and we could compare this data with the national census. We will also start in 2022, which in Rwanda we will also make use of the 6 short set of questions of the Washington group. So that is in a nutshell this DMIS in Rwanda. Murakoze cyane. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Fred, with a beautiful presentation and a very comprehensive system indeed. Hopefully it's going to work and we're going to use you as a pilot. We will learn a lot once to roll it out. Let's see if we have any questions from the floor. Do we have any questions from the chat box, Heidi?
Yes, there is one, Fried from Martina Orsender, and she wants to know, how does this link to the Rwanda census?
How it's linked, I think, so the Rwandan census will start next year, 2022. We have already contacts with them to make use of the Washington group questions, of course. And then, because we make use of survey solutions of the World Bank, which have these API linkages. So if the Rwanda statistics have also this API, we could link these databases with each other.
Thank you for that. And there is another question from Maria Martino from UNDESA. How are people selected to fill the initial questionnaire in DMIS? And you make sure all the people who need it are covered.
Thank you for this question. Of course, this is quite challenging. So that's why in the first couple of years, we will go door to door. Although not door to door, we will go to every village in Rwanda because it's quite structured here in Rwanda. So we have around 12 million. So at least we will identify 1 million persons with disability. So through village leaders, through community health workers, through OPDs, through already people we know, we will identify as many as possible persons with disability, but also through a snowball method to ask maybe friends, our family, our neighbors. We will go to institutions in mental health, also children institutions, to have as many as possible persons with disability registered in the system. And hopefully in the future, it could also be a base for this disability grant, which we don't have at this moment in Rwanda.
Fried, you have one last question from Mayra Bonalensi from IBGE in Brazil. She wants to know, is there any document on the assessment instrument used to capture people with disabilities? Was only the WG questions used? I'm sorry if this part has already been explained. I may have gotten lost.
Sorry, I don't fully understand the question. So what kind of documents she needed or she wants to see?
It seems if there's any document on the assessment instrument that was used to capture people with disabilities, and just if only the Washington group questions were used.
as mentioned already during the presentation, we will make use of different types of sets of tools, not only from the Washington Group, we will include them all, but also the RATA, which is about assistive devices from the WHO, some questions from the WHO community-based rehabilitation. So all these questionnaires are free available worldwide. So that's why we don't add additional questions. The only additional questions we've added, it's about albinism and it's about short stature, because that's still important in the Rwandan context. And of course, some questions about some specific social support systems we have. All the others are captured from the sets already existing in globally. Thank you.
Okay, we are now going to try this once again, and thank you very much to Sophia from JIZ, who let me know that I actually needed to select something specifically to share the sound. This is not something I was familiar with, and so we're going to try this again, and hopefully this time it will work. I am sharing sound, and let's see. Okay.
I think before we start, Heidi, there are still questions on the chat box. They're not done with Fred yet.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't see any other questions.
Yeah, there is another one.
Okay.
Sorry, that was my fault. I was just my chat kept disappearing when I was trying to type, so I was being slow. I just wanted to know if the questionnaire was actually the full questionnaire that you used with all of those different things combined was actually published anywhere that we could access to have a look at.
Yes, it's still a draft. Actually, now this week we are piloting with the tablets because it's all offline also in the rural areas. But of course, if we have this pilot version, if you go to Survey Solutions, we will make it free available for everyone in the world. But please take some time, because still we are working on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So it actually,
I just have one more question from my side. When do you think you're going to roll out your system? Because it's very interesting. I'm sure many other countries would love to learn from you. And also with documentation, obviously.
There is thank you for this question. There is already some documentation, and even we have some support as well from the Washington Group. Some consultants which also will work in the support us in the coming year. So now we are doing this design and development of this structure, this IT structure, which will be finished by the end of this year. The first 3 months of in 2022, we will do this piloting in one district, and after the kickoff, we will do countrywide implementation. I think from June, July onwards, and then probably it will take at least 2 more years. It depends on the funding, because to go to all the districts and villages, there is still a lot of funding is needed to identify all the persons with disability in Rwanda.
So it's not necessarily that you're going to be servicing people at different points. You're going to be moving around to people to try to get those people who have disabilities from the communities.
Yes, thank you. We will do a kind of a campaign, awareness raising campaign, and so even on television and on even on mobile phones, the national provider here for mobile phones services will give some free access to this. So SMS, text messages, a telephone, radio, to encourage people to register, but also to show the benefits for this registration. Not only maybe individual benefits, although some of them, they have these benefits, but also to have more knowledge about disability in Rwanda, so that the government of Rwanda could think about appropriate services for the most in need. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Fred. Heidi, I think we can go ahead with Costa Rica if you're ready. And please make sure there are subtitles as well, because last time we didn't see anything. It was only the voice.
okay. Yes, that's what we're going to try to go for right now. So thank you again to Sophia from GIZ, who told me that I actually need to have select the audio. So hopefully, let me know.
Agradeciendo al grupo de Washington
Does that,
la oportunidad de
can you hear?
presentarles un poco del trabajo que
Yeah,
hemos
we
venido
can hear
realizando en
you.
Costa Rica con el propósito
Perfect.
de poder disponer de datos
Yeah.
And
que
you
nos
see the
permitan
image?
medir el cumplimiento
Yeah, we
de los
can see the
derechos
image,
Perfect.
you
de las
can
personas
see the
con discapacidad
subtitles as well. Everything is there.
estipulados en la Convención de Derechos de las Personas con Discapacidad. Y a partir de ahí formular políticas públicas adecuadas para que estos derechos sean una realidad para esta población. Ante la carencia de datos de calidad sobre la población con discapacidad y sobre el nivel de cumplimiento de sus derechos, entre los años 2015 y 2016, el Consejo Nacional de Personas con Discapacidad, con el apoyo del Instituto Nacional de Estadística y Censos y el Ministerio de Planificación y Política Económica, formuló el proyecto Sistema Costarricense de Información sobre Discapacidad, SICID, el cual se ejecutó entre los años 2017 y 2021 y a partir de ahora está iniciando su etapa de operación. Este sistema se constituye en la plataforma oficial de coordinación y vinculación institucional y articulación del Estado costarricense para facilitar la gestión y distribución del conocimiento de la información nacional sobre discapacidad y sobre los derechos de las personas con discapacidad. El proyecto SICID se crea justamente por la escasa información de calidad, confiable, comparable y sistemática sobre el estado de los derechos de las personas con discapacidad, lo que tenía como consecuencia la exclusión de la discapacidad en los sistemas de información y en la investigación académica, entre otros. Así también, el SICID se formuló para disponer de información para elaborar políticas públicas informadas, justificar la dotación de recursos públicos, evaluar el cumplimiento de las obligaciones del Estado costarricense con relación a los derechos de las personas con discapacidad y para rendir cuentas sobre los resultados de las acciones del Estado para cumplir los derechos de las personas con discapacidad. Para ello, originalmente se definieron 4 subsistemas. El primer subsistema es un catálogo de productos y servicios de apoyo para las personas con discapacidad, en donde se pueda tener la información sobre productos y servicios de apoyo disponibles en el país. El segundo es un repositorio de documentos electrónicos sobre discapacidad en acceso abierto a la información y conocimiento, disponibles en el país sobre discapacidad. El tercero es estadísticas sobre discapacidad, que incluye estadísticas nacionales producidas por el Instituto Nacional de Estadística y Censos, la encuesta nacional sobre discapacidad y una batería de indicadores sobre los derechos de las personas con discapacidad. Finalmente, se tiene el subsistema de gestión del conocimiento, el cual incluye la plataforma electrónica para la gestión del SICID, así como una herramienta de sistema de gestión de aprendizaje.
El subsistema de estadísticas sobre discapacidad consiste en la producción y divulgación de datos e información sobre los derechos de las personas con discapacidad, la cual se consideran las estadísticas oficiales del Estado costarricense en esta materia. Este subsistema está compuesto por 3 componentes, los cuales son 1. Estadísticas nacionales, 2. La encuesta nacional sobre discapacidad en ADIS y 3. Los indicadores sobre los derechos de las personas con discapacidad. En el 2016 se realizó un diagnóstico de la producción estadística sobre discapacidad en Costa Rica para fundamentar la necesidad de generar un sistema de información estadística sobre discapacidad que oriente la toma de decisiones informada de gestión de políticas públicas inclusivas. En este estudio se detectaron las siguientes necesidades principales. La primera, el uso homogéneo y claro del concepto de discapacidad, la conceptualización operativa de discapacidad, incluir variables para clasificar a las personas con discapacidad y que además permita realizar una descripción de esta población, incluir variables cualitativas y cuantitativas para tener mayor disposición de información que permita realizar análisis de carácter descriptivo e inferencial, lo que enriquecerá los análisis de la población en estudio, la capacitación adecuada para quienes tienen a cargo recolectar los datos y la definición de indicadores sobre los derechos de las personas con discapacidad. Entre finales del 2017 y el 2018 se realizó un proceso de definición de los indicadores de los derechos de las personas con discapacidad, el cual consiste en mediciones específicas sobre cada uno de los derechos comprendidos en la Convención de Derechos de las Personas con Discapacidad. Estos indicadores se definieron siguiendo los lineamientos del Alto Comisionado de los Derechos Humanos de las Naciones Unidas, agrupándolos por 3 tipos: estructurales, de proceso y de resultado.
En la ficha de cada indicador se definió la fuente de los datos, entre las que se identificaron encuestas nacionales y registros administrativos. Sin embargo, en el caso de los registros administrativos, no había uniformidad en la forma de registrar los datos de discapacidad. Predominaba el enfoque médico y no se contaba con un instrumento para el registro de los datos de las personas con discapacidad homologado entre las instituciones y que estuviera construido desde el enfoque de derechos o del modelo social de la discapacidad. Con la necesidad de contar con un instrumento para la obtención de datos de la población con discapacidad, se valoró la utilización del set corto de Washington como un instrumento probado que, si bien no fue elaborado para registros administrativos, sino para censos y encuestas, era lo más cercano a un instrumento que por sus características se pudiera incluir en los registros administrativos. En este proceso se logró incluir el set corto en el formulario del Registro Único de Beneficiarios del Estado, que es un sistema de información que reúne información de las diferentes instituciones que prestan servicios sociales en Costa Rica. Por tanto, este avance garantiza para poder identificar a la población con discapacidad que accede a los programas sociales. Además, también hay otras instituciones que han incorporado el set corto en los formularios de sus registros o que están en proceso de hacerlo, tales como el Ministerio de Cultura, el Instituto Mixto de Ayuda Social y el proyecto de la Agencia Nacional de Empleo. Entre las principales limitaciones que se enfrentan para la implementación del set corto en los registros administrativos es que con el set corto no se registra a la población en el dominio psicosocial, quedando excluida gran parte de la población en situación de discapacidad que recibe servicios del Estado. Además, no es posible homologar las categorías del set corto con categorías utilizadas anteriormente para el registro de la población con discapacidad, lo que genera un problema para la actualización de los sistemas de información y para rescatar los datos registrados con otras categorías diferentes a las del Grupo de Washington. Por otro lado, el cambio paradigmático en discapacidad que supone el set corto no es entendido con facilidad por la mayoría de la población, debido a la predominancia ideológica del enfoque médico, todo lo cual provoca mucha dificultad para la adaptación de los sistemas de información a las instituciones. Entre las acciones inmediatas a realizar, se deben establecer lineamientos técnicos para la mediación de la discapacidad en encuestas, censos y registros administrativos, en conjunto entre el Consejo Nacional de Personas con Discapacidad y el Instituto Nacional de Estadística y Censos. Así también hay que identificar la forma más adecuada de incorporar en la medición a las personas con discapacidad psicosocial e incorporarla en los instrumentos de captura de datos como el set corto. Y que CONADIS continúe el trabajo de incorporar la medición de la discapacidad en registros administrativos de las instituciones públicas en el corto y mediano plazo, así como en actores privados estratégicos en el mediano y el largo plazo. Muchas gracias.
Oh, thank you. Are we done, Heidi?
Yes, that was the presentation.
All right. I'm not sure whether we do have questions from the floor or any questions from the chat box. And I do understand our session has gone over by almost 10 minutes. So you'll forgive us about that. And it was due to the technical glitches that the presentation was we're experiencing with the presentation for Costa Rica. I see there are no questions, there are no hands raised, and I don't think there's any question on the chat box. So I believe this will bring us to the end of the session. I'm not sure whether you would want us to talk about the future of this work group moving forward, Heidi, as well.
Yeah, Jaliswa, thank you so much for bringing that up. That's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to, in order to elicit feedback from participants, we're going to launch a poll to ask you all what you think about what the next steps regarding disability data collection in the context of administrative records should be for the Washington group. So you're going to see a poll pop up on your screen with one question. And if we would please take a moment to answer, we would greatly appreciate it. So the question is, what should the next step or steps, you can select more than one response, be in advancing the work on the use of the Washington Group tools in administrative records? So please record your responses. We're very interested in hearing what you think about this.
Heidi, you said we can choose more than one answer, but it's only giving us a single choice, not more than that.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I wasn't, when we set it up, we thought we set it up for more than one. So I guess in this case, if you could please just select your top answer, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.
So for now, we have about 46 people participating, and we have about 100 participants. So I encourage those of you who have not yet participated to please let us know your thoughts on this. How about just one more person so we can get to the 50%? There we go. Okay, so I will close out the poll now. And up, we have 51. Anyone else? Okay, we will end the poll. And we are seeing the results here. What we see in response to the question, what should the next steps be in advancing the work on the use of the Washington Group tools in administrative records? The response category that had the most votes was develop a guidance note on this topic. Then the next one was promote work on this topic at the regional level. So that's something that can also be done. And about 13 of the 52 respondents felt that it was important to share experiences or have a meeting to share experiences on this topic. So these are options that the Washington Group Secretariat will consider going forward, and in particular, develop a guidance note on this topic. So now we will move on to the next session of the meeting. And I'm going to just pull up my screen quickly so we can have the presentation. Just 1 second. So here we are. We are now in session 6, and this is the regional work group updates. As we mentioned on the first day, we wanted to make an effort to make some innovations for this 21st annual meeting. And one of the innovations that we decided to try out is holding the regional work group updates as breakout sessions. So in a few minutes, I will launch the breakout rooms, and they will be structured around the existing regional disability statistics groups that exist. And there are actually 7 groups, but one is 6 groups, I'm sorry, but one is the Pacific group, and they're not represented today because of the time difference. So we will have 5 groups that correspond to the existing regional disability statistics groups: the Casablanca group, the Brazzaville group, the Kathmandu group, the Buenos Aires group, and the South and East Africa group. Now, some of you will, of course, decide to choose the breakout room to which your country already belongs, the Regional Disability Statistics Group to which your country already belongs. Others may see that there is a disability statistics group in their region, but they don't yet belong to that group. So we especially encourage you to join those sessions so you can learn more about the group and how to become involved. Others of you, particularly partners from international NGOs or the UN system, clearly don't belong to any of these groups, but perhaps you have ongoing work in one of these regions, so you are free to join those groups. And if none of the above categories apply to you, you may also choose to join the last group, which is the non-affiliated countries and partners. So in these groups, the chair of the group, in the case of the first 5 groups, will lead the discussion. The final group, non-affiliated countries, Jennifer Maddens, the president and chair of the Washington Group Secretariat, will lead that discussion. And the discussion will center around progress and next steps, and also ways in which the Washington Group can support the work of the regional groups. You will have about 30 minutes in the room to discuss, perhaps a little bit shorter in view of the time, and then we'll have a report back session. So in this case, the chairs will come back to plenary and share 1 or 2 updates or main messages from the discussions. So if there are no questions at this time, I'm going to launch the breakout rooms. And again, you select the one that the most applies to you. Let me see here. And so here you should have the breakout rooms, and please just, we're gonna open all the rooms. I'm not sure, and then you can just go down here and click join.
You might want to stop sharing your screen
I'm sorry.
first.
There we go. Is that better?
And then, yeah, because the breakout rooms did not pop up, and I'm not sure if it's the sharing of the screen or not.
Do you see them now?
No.
Okay, let's try this again. 1 second. There?
No.
Yeah, it says all participants have been invited to join. It does say that.
Not yet.
Open all rooms.
It says that the breakout rooms have been opened, but it says please wait to be assigned. So it doesn't give us an option for assigning ourselves.
I see. Brianna, is there anything that we can do about this? Because that would be.
Should be okay now.
Okay.
So you'll have to click on the icon at the bottom of your screen that says breakout rooms. And once you join that, you will see the groups.
Yeah, people seem to be able to join,
yes.
seeing them.
Yeah, that's better.
Now it's working.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Xoliswa, and I will be co-chairing this session with Renise. I'm not sure whether she has joined. Renise from Kenya as a co-chair. Renise, are you here? Have you joined in?
Hi, Xoliswa, I'm in. Good morning, good evening, everyone. Yes.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. I think we can start talking about our group. And one thing that I want us to just bring to your attention before we start with any discussions is that this group has not officially taken off. We were supposed to have met, however, we had some problems in terms of coordination. Because remember, we are two independent regions trying to come together to form one region. There is SADC region and there is East Africa region. So obviously the manner in which we do things is not going to be the same. So we have been struggling to bring everybody on board, and also with the issue of coming up with the documentation, because we had hoped that by the time we sort of we convene a meeting, which will be an inception meeting for the region, we would be having terms of reference, we'll be having all the basic necessary documentation that is needed. But so far we have managed to put together terms of reference, and we haven't really shared it with other countries apart from just amongst ourselves, since we're still trying to sort of brush it up to make it look good before we can send it out to other countries. So I think our point of departure that I want us to focus on is how best can we organize ourselves before the inception meeting, because we haven't really come up with any way forward on that regard. So I'm hoping out of this discussion, we'll have a sort of a clear way forward on how can we coordinate ourselves towards the workshop that we want to do, the introductory workshop, where we'll be inviting all other countries. Thank you. Renise, I think you can come in as well.
Thank you, Xoliswa. Maybe after proposing when we can, or the way forward, we also need to come up with some of the activities that can be supported by GIZ. I remember they said that they can easily support us in maybe coming up with some of the documentations that we need, yeah, among others. So let's also think about that. Thank you.
Colleagues, I think before we can jump to the activities that we need to coordinate ourselves first. We need to be organized. So I think I will suggest a way forward. From our side, from the SADC region, we do have a regional structure that we can coordinate ourselves through it, the SADC region. So I would sort of put forward a request to say East Africa through you, Renise. Perhaps there could be a structure that you can use as well to coordinate the countries in the eastern side, so that by the time we converge or we convene a meeting, we're already speaking the same language, because right now we have been trying to organize ourselves through the SADC region, using the SADC offices. Perhaps you can try the same thing on your side, so that when we meet, we are on the same level. I do understand the documentation part, and I do understand even the activity part. However, we cannot start at that level if we haven't found each other at this point in time, because terms of reference are very clear, are they? However, in terms of the work program and even the activities that we think we're going to engage on moving forward, we need to do that as a regional group, as already formed regional group. I think we can discuss some of these things from our inception meeting, where we will sort of sell the idea to other people, and then we will come up with those activities at that level. But here right now, I suggest we sort of try to find each other, try to find ways how we're going to coordinate this group to make it more effective in terms of being productive and moving forward and doing the work.
Xoliswa, can I come in?
Yes, please, Maggie.
Do we have a list of all the countries that would be part of the group? And I don't know from the names on here, but it clearly doesn't cover all the countries. I know we've got Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, South Africa, I think Lesotho. What we could do is contact all the statistical officers of all the countries and ask if they want to be involved in it, and then we from there set a meeting that we then go through discussing what the aims of the regional working group would be. There probably are countries that haven't been involved in the Washington group at all. So that first meeting might need to actually go through some of the basics of the Washington group. I don't know, that's just a very weak idea from me. And just to say, I'm load shedding and I might run out of data as well. So if I just disappear, that's what's happening.
It's okay, Maggie. It's okay. We are all going through that in South Africa.
You understand, I know.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Maggie, for the idea. You are noted, Neo. We're going to come back to you now. Oh, Namibia is on board as well. Yes, Meg, your idea is actually quite correct. However, we had raised that in the media meeting that we had to say we would want the Secretariat to sort of shield us moving to the first meeting before we can stand on our own. However, we're told that we need to be very much active in trying to coordinate and bring the countries on board, but they will be there, the Secretariat, to support us. However, we need to stand on our own. We need to send the invitation to the countries. But what we have realized, obviously, because we cannot do it alone, we do it as an office, which is Statistics South Africa. We are told that there are protocols that we have to follow. We don't just dump and go to the NSOs in different countries. So we have done it using our own internal protocols, which in unfortunate sense, they end at SADC level. And so we are saying, Renice from her side, that side of East Africa, she must use her own network to bring people from that side, the countries from that side, the NSOs from that side, so that when we meet already knowing the processes. Now you are recognized, you can take over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think you've already touched on some of the issues that I wanted to highlight. The first one is that one of, you've touched on it, that we already have the draft terms of reference, and maybe we will circulate among the member group, yeah, or among the members, the draft terms of reference, because they also highlight those countries that are included. So in case we have missed some of the country, then maybe members can indicate to that. But again, the other issue that I want to highlight in this meeting, as we are talking about the work plan, about 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting with the Washington group, and they sort of confirmed that they have confirmed funding, that they have received funding, and that funding will run from October 2020 October 2021 to October 2022. So part of that funding will assist in the appointment of the project coordinator, who will be of assistance to us in establishing the regional, regional group, and to also assist in the coordination of meetings. So based on that, sort of a work plan. We thought of a work plan whereby the initial part will be that one of the launch, and where members will also agree on the work plan and also review the terms of reference. Yes, with the assistance of the project coordinator. Okay, thanks, Chair. That's what I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you, Neo. So based on what you've just said, you're saying there are funds that are allocated, which are going to be used to the project coordinator. So can I ask whether perhaps are we allowed to get a project coordinator who will coordinate the entire process? Or I don't think I understand that part.
So
Please
maybe
clarify.
here I can jump in. I'm sorry. So from what we understand with the BMZ GIZ project, a project coordinator will be hired to support both the Brazzaville group activities and the activities of the South and East Africa disability statistics groups. So in the past, if you had any contact with Angela, then this person will have a similar role to Angela in terms of facilitating, organizing meetings, and that kind of sort of more secretarial work to help, once you have decided what your activities will be, to help you sort of on the administrative side of doing those activities. And as the funds cannot go from the government of Germany to the Washington group directly, this is a grant that is being co-administered by UCL, or administered by UCL, which is University College London. This is the same as it's been done in the past with the funds that were received from the DFAT in Australia. So we imagine something similar. So this, and this project coordinator, I understand, is in the process of being hired now. So soon we should be able to count with her support. But precisely the types of things that you were saying, convening meetings, emailing potential participants, organizing this first meeting that Margie mentioned, those are things that could be done by this project coordinator.
All right, thank you, Heidi. So when can we expect to have the project coordinator on board?
Oh, this is an excellent question. So we have the same question for UCL. We understand that they've identified someone already, but it's sort of their internal processes for hiring sometimes take a little bit of time, but we understand that it should be in the coming weeks. So that would be our hope. But we will, of course, keep you abreast of any developments. And once the person is on board, we'll have a call to introduce, so we can all introduce ourselves.
Hello, sorry about that. Okay, so as a way forward, we all understand that we need to come up with, we need to organize ourselves before the coordinator comes, obviously, because I don't think the coordinator will organize us. We need to organize ourselves first. And the issue of activities, I think as well as that one, we cannot decide at this point as to what will be the activities that will go into our work plan, because I don't think we are all here as of now, because we haven't even lobbied enough for other countries. Remember, our idea when we started, we said we're not going to focus only to the countries that have subscribed to the Washington group idea. We also want those who are not part of it, so that we can move forward together as a region and enrich our own disability statistics. So I think as a way forward, I don't know, maybe you will agree with me, or you will sort of raise it if you don't agree with me. I still believe that the East Africa can please coordinate themselves, and then we continue coordinate SADC side, and then when we convene a meeting, we do it in a very much coordinated manner. And we have started this side to do that using our own internal resources at Stats SA. So we're hoping that Renise, that side, as you are the co-chair of the group, you will do the same that side. But when we do send out the letters inviting different NSO, obviously we're gonna send out one letter. It's not gonna be a letter that is coming from you, Renise, or a letter that is coming from us. It will be the letter that comes from all of us as the region.
I think
But
I
in
also
terms of
recall,
coordination.
oh, sorry, Jaliswa. I also recall during the meeting that we had with you, you weren't present, I think, but Neo was there and Renice was there last week or the week before, that the Washington group also expressed that it could send those letters in conjunction or in coordination also, if that is decided. So I just wanted to offer that as something that was discussed during that meeting. And then Margie is asking, I guess, Jaliswa or Renice in the chat, what countries are already on board? So here, of course, we have South Africa and Kenya. We also have Uganda and Namibia. But if you are in touch with other countries that, maybe it would be a good idea to understand who's already on board and then who needs to be contacted.
From our side, I would safely say Namibia has already indicated to be on board. They are part of the discussion as we are here right now. So I would say Namibia, I would say Lesotho, but I wouldn't confidently mention them one by one because like I'm saying, we still need to do some lobbying to bring these countries on board. Hence I'm saying, let's do those regional lobbies at this point in time. And then we can make sure that moving forward, we can confidently mention all these countries one by one. But for now, like we said, we have put together the TORs, which we are hoping we would use as we do the lobbying, obviously. But unfortunately, we haven't sent anything to any country. That's where we are. Hence, I'm saying the coordination, we don't want to centralize it to South Africa or centralize it to Kenya at this point in time. We want to be more of a decentralized approach. SADC, we deal with it this side, and then the Renice deals with East that side. But somewhere, somehow, we'll find a point of convergence. We're not going to continue being decentralized, but for lobbying, bringing people on board, that's the plan that we're thinking we will sort of pursue. But I'm not sure whether the group is in agreement with the approach because we are here to discuss a possible way forward. Yes, Neil.
Can I
Thanks, Maggie. Now you are breaking.
Indication in this.
Sorry,
Okay.
Neil, you are breaking.
Okay. Can I just get an indication of which country is better? Can you hear me now?
Okay, start over again.
Okay, maybe I'll write it on the chat, but I wanted to find out which countries are currently attending this breakaway session from the two regions. Yes. We have Uganda.
Yes, Pamela, I saw you. Uganda is on board. I saw you, and I saw Namibia as well. I can see on the chat box, Maggie is agreeing with the idea. And we have Rwanda as well. And it's just not going to be easy to mention some of these countries because they're not written next to the names now. Unless you want us to say, I'm from South Africa, I'm from Rwanda, I'm from whatever. So it's not going to be easy to mention them here. They are not written next to the names. But let's just assume we are 11 here.
So maybe people can write it in the chat and then we can see.
Next to their names.
Yeah, yeah.
Can we do that, colleagues? Just next to your name, indicate your country so that we can have an idea as to how many are we here and which countries are here represented. I think while we're doing that, now you can continue with the point that you wanted to put forward.
In fact, that was my question, Chair. I needed to see which countries are currently represented. It will also assist when we are circulating the documents, I guess, if people can indicate even their email addresses, but I'm sure we can be able to get that info from the secretariat as well. Thanks.
Yeah, I think email address is going to get them from Heidi.
Yes, I can send those. And just one comment, colleagues, we are going to soon be ending this session. So just be prepared for that. But yes, we'll be able to provide you with the email information of those who are in the session.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Just in the interest of time, we would have greatly liked to extend that session a little bit more so you had more time to discuss, but we are running a little bit behind schedule. So we've reconvened you, and at this time, we would like to invite the chair of the Casablanca group to give us a 2-minute update of the main points that were discussed during that session. Please, Riham, go ahead.
Shall we move to the next group?
Yep. And then if someone from the Brazzaville group could please provide us an update, go ahead. Steve, you're on mute.
Oui, excuse me, I'll have to speak in French, so Eddie, it's okay?
That's fine. Everyone that wants to listen to the English has to go to the bottom of their screen where it says interpretation and go to the English
Merci
interpretation.
beaucoup. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. So, the session of our group, Brazzaville group, we talked mainly about 2 points. First was grouping of countries, because we've seen that every time this happens, some countries are not in the room. So it would be good if we could have an ability so that we could try to encourage countries to see the level of progress when we're using the Washington Group tools, when it comes to data collection, and also the surveys that are carried out, the participants take part. So if we could have this type of meeting, that would help in person. then there were some financial concerns which would not allow us to have these face-to-face meetings in that context. Therefore, we suggested that we therefore have another type of meeting, and that would be a regular series of meetings so that we could try to monitor the progress made in the field of data collection and when it comes to statistics on disability. That would help us. Also, we would like to keep up to date
aussi bien en Afrique centrale que en Afrique.
Also, when it comes to Central and West French-speaking Africa, to talk to those responsible at the Statistics Institute and communicate with them directly. That would be useful.
Nos activités pour 2020.
So that we could implement our actions for 2019-20 for 2022 to have the information to hand. So we keep that in mind, but we also have training programs on focus points relating to data collection, how this is carried out, how it's analyzed by the Washington Group, the groups which are available on the website, whichever format is preferred, it doesn't matter, but that would allow us to understand and analyze the terms of reference of the Brazzaville Group would be validated and approved with the Secretariat of the Washington Group, which would in some way allow us to implement our activities for next year.
La GIZ, le gouvernement allemand,
and give us an A to Z of the finance which would be given to the Brazzaville Group, thanks to the leadership of the Washington Group and also the partners at UCL, University College London. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve, for that update. We would now invite the chair of the Buenos Aires group to provide their update. Go ahead.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, all the colleagues. Can you listen to me right? It's okay? Yeah. Okay, I firstly want to thank the Washington Group for this moment. I think we can celebrate that we had this small group meeting inside this conference, the Washington Group as a whole. So we celebrate that. We speak like the small Buenos Aires group meeting also. We speak in Spanish, and we try to focus in a few points that we worked in the past and the next steps for the group. We speak about the working groups inside the Buenos Aires group. Also, we speak about the ECLAC consulting that is developing inside the, as the presentation of Dan and Costa Rica and the other presentation too, about the administrative records. In this case, we are trying to make a work inside the administrative records in education in the Latin American countries. Also, we speak about the meeting that we have with the Ibero-American Disability Program that we are trying to make 10 bridges, that's the way that it says, with them to work together and to have also a joint working group in the future, or try to make some work together. Also, we passed through the work that Costa Rica has made and about the translation of the protocol of the cognitive test on the psychosocial dimension of the Washington groups, in order to have some tools also for the Latin American countries. I think that they already sent to the Washington group secretary. So we planned also, and we speak inside the group, that maybe it's a good way to start trying and testing it in our region. I think that that's all the points that we covered in the minutes that we had. Again, it was a great opportunity to have reunited the countries of our region and to speak inside this Washington Group meeting conference. We have the time or a few minutes to talk, and that was great. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Nicolas. Thank you very much for that update. Next, we would invite the chair of the Kathmandu group to provide the update of that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Heidi, for this opportunity to brief about the progress made so far from the Kathmandu group. In our meeting, out of 8 members of the Kathmandu group, we are 5 from Bangladesh, from Bhutan, Maldives, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and India. And there was 1 member observer from Philippines. In our breakout session, we discussed about the progress made so far since the first meeting that was held in 15 July this year. And at the time we had decided to develop a TOR of this group, and the revised version of TOR is shared with all the member countries except Pakistan, because we don't have the actual contact person of Pakistan, and it is also shared with the Washington group. And in our breakout session, the members, the participants discuss about their upcoming plans in their census and surveys going to be conducted. Maldives is going to conduct its census next year, and they are going to use the short set. Similarly, Sri Lanka is also going to use the short set in their coming census. And Bhutan, it did conducted its 2 population censuses, and in both censuses they used the short set, and it was pretty good experience using the short set. And for the plan for coming 1 year or 2 years, we are thinking of having a meeting, second meeting of this group very soon, and in that meeting we'll be identifying what can we do, what will be the best activities to be conducted in the coming year, and what will be the areas of our priorities in our action plan. And the member from India raised an important issue that whether this Kathmandu group will have a formal status or an informal status. This issue was also raised in the first meeting, and we had agreed that taking clearance or approval from the higher authority to be the formal group may take time for some NSOs. So we agreed to keep this Kathmandu group as an informal one, and it will work as an informal group. And Mr. Sanjay from India asked us to prepare minutes of this discussion and circulate among the members. so that it will be kept in record and can be well communicated to the authorities. So I'll keep a minutes of this breakout session and circulate to the members. So these are the main discussions and some points that we are going to prepare expert directory of experts in disability statistics and in the areas of disability in this region, so that in the workshops and trainings for capacity building, we can have their contribution. And the expert diary, and yeah, certainly, very certainly, we'll have the second meeting of this Kathmandu group, and we'll develop a plan of action. These are the main points we discussed in the breakout session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajan, for that update. We now invite the chairs of the South and East Africa Regional Disability Statistics Groups to provide their update.
Okay, thank you very much, colleagues, for an opportunity. These are the main points that we discussed as a group. We acknowledge that we already have developed the draft terms of reference, and so we agreed that we will get hold of the email addresses and then circulate the terms of references to all potential members of the regional group. Secondly, funding has been confirmed, and we understand also appoint a project coordinator who will assist us in coordinating the regional group in terms of facilitating and coordinating meetings, and also assisting in the development of the work plan. So we'll await feedback from the Washington Group Secretariat with regards to the feedback regarding the appointment. So we've also agreed that since this regional group is comprised of two regions, that is the Southern Africa and the Eastern Africa, for now, that we are still in the process of lobbying and coordinating member countries, we've agreed that Kenya will lobby for the Eastern Africa, as it will be easier to manage the protocols there, while South Africa will coordinate and lobby countries in the Southern Africa region. Then at the later stage, we'll then, at the launch, for instance, we'll then form one group. And another issue is that at the inception meeting, that's where member states will, firstly, we will review the terms of reference and finalize them, agree on the activities for the year, and then develop the work plan. Yes, that's all what we have discussed. And yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Neo, for that update. And now if Jennifer could just provide us a brief, some key messages from the non-affiliated and partners discussion.
Sure. We had actually a very heterogeneous mix of attendees at the group. There was a general agreement, I think, that it would be good to have a non-affiliated group for those countries and other partners that didn't fit nicely into one of the regional groups, although as mentioned, a country can be in more than one group as well. There was some interest in maybe thinking about setting up the Southeast Asia group again. to see if that is viable. But if not, then the countries from that region would remain with the non-affiliated group, and then the other countries that were represented were positive about being a part of the non-affiliated group. So I think moving forward, we should think about what might happen in Southeast Asia, and then for the other countries, do some kind of outreach from the Secretariat to make them aware that a non-affiliated group will kind of be formed. And then I think a little bit of a challenge will be to try to focus in on what the terms of reference and the work plan might be for that group. There was some suggestion that a particular topics of our might be of particular interest in that group, and that those might be a focus as well. So I think take home is, yes, there's interest in this, we should continue on, but there'll be some thought work to do about how best to use the time and the resources of the members of such a group. Thanks.
Excellent. So if there are no further questions on this, and considering the time, we will move to session number 7, which will be moderated by Renice Bund from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Renice, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hayes, and everyone. Well, now we are in session 7, where we are going to look at how Washington Group tools have been used in humanitarian crisis and emergencies. And we are going to have 2 presenters. That is, we have Ricardo from UNHCR and Mario from Education Cannot Wait, who are going to show us how they've used the tools to address education in disability, and how UNHCR is carrying out their mandate through the Washington Group tools. So I'll give Ricardo the first chance, after which we'll have Mario. And then after the 2 presentations, we'll have the questions and answers session. So welcome, Ricardo.
Thank you. I don't know if I can, that's it. Now I can share my screen. Okay, so sharing there and launching. Is it visible? Yes, I guess it's fine.
Yeah, we can see it.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So thank you so much for giving this time to present on the, perhaps I wanted to step back a little bit and present not only on the work that UNHCR is doing to promote data on persons with disabilities, but to explore as well trends and prevalence on humanitarian settings and situations of forced displacement, which include not only classic humanitarian settings, including conflicts and disasters, but as well some of the countries where refugees or displaced persons arrive as asylum seekers, etc. So many of the countries that are present in the call would be as well interested in discussing and learning from this, in my opinion. We will present how UNHCR offered an opportunity to enhance data on persons with disabilities. What were the issues that we were facing in regards to the methods that we were using, and then describe how we integrated the Washington Group questions into our registration system. So changing the slides, it appears an infographic on the right that is extracted from the Interagency Standing Committee Guidelines on Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities that were developed 3 years ago. And they are representing estimates on the world population who have a disability. So the 15% that is often used is recommended for humanitarian action as a minimum standard prevalence number for planning purposes. However, it was recognized that the impact of disability in conflict and disasters may have an impact in the prevalence of disability as well. So it would be higher in this context. Recent data that have been used in the Washington Group questions in disaster or conflict contexts, but as well in refugee contexts in countries that have absorbed refugee displacement is confirming this trend. And we have on the left side of the screen Syria with 27% of the population living with a disability over the age of 12, if I'm not wrong, and then Jordan with 21%. Important to note that the document in Jordan was not a disability prevalence exercise. It was rather a population survey exercise, which included disability. So these type of practices are more and more common across both UNHCR context, but humanitarian context as well, with the coordination from OCHA, for example, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. However, there was still a gap on having reliable data from other contexts. And there is where UNHCR could have an opportunity to enhance data disaggregated by disability. In this slide, which is, well, a very small representation or graphic of how the UNHCR's population registration and identity management ecosystem looks like. There is a module that supports collecting data across a demographic and social demographic factors, socioeconomic factors as well, family composition, individual data, etc. It's a very comprehensive, let's say, module that is or system application, it could be called, that is Progress Before, that is at the center. I don't know if you see my mouse hovering over it. That as a core module offered the possibility of including data on persons with disabilities. It included already data, and we identified that it would have an opportunity to enhance this data, being then a module that nourishes data used by a national level partners, partner level, other UNHCR tools that are used for case management, delivery of protection and assistance, etc. So having this entry point at the core of our data ecosystem was a very good opportunity. Now, how was already UNHCR identifying persons with disabilities? Well, since the early 2000s, there was a system called specific needs codes. Those were identified as attributes or situations that require particular notice, intervention, or follow-up. These are shared, very commonly shared situations of risk that could place persons of concern to UNHCR at a particular protection or would require follow-up. They are very often in registration. So when persons of concern or persons who are asylum seekers are crossing borders or are arriving to other countries or are internally displaced as well, and there is a process to register these individuals and ensure that as a step to ensure their assistance and protection, there is a specification, let's say, in the standard operation procedures to prioritize these individuals for registration interviews, so they don't have to spend a lot of time in being non-identified and as well in waiting areas where the risks may be increased. They are very often referred to protection staff, and persons with disabilities are among those the 7 groups that are more prioritized for registration. Now, the way data used to look in the past, and this is a very, again, crowded graphic, but what I wanted to highlight was that First, there were a number of subcategories that were used usually with training for our staff, and they were using visual cues based on impairment types of disability. So visual impairment, physical disability with divisions in moderate, severe, then using sometimes as well non-human rights aligned language such as mental disability, etc. So those were the codes that were used until this year. And the resulting prevalence, this is the second point that I wanted to highlight in this graphic, is on the top right of the slide. It was around 1.5. So it was a very low prevalence if we compare with the prevalence that we've seen in studies that were using the Washington Group questions. So why we decided to change the existing codes that, and to use the Washington Group questions? Well, visual cues are usually not recommended because they are an unreliable method. We see on the right side of the screen a poster that is used more as a sensitization point for avoid identifying refugees using visual cues, because refugees can look like anyone else, and the same happens with disability. So we had that point of connection that we could use as well to raise the awareness of our staff as regards to the unreliability of the method. It resulted in underreporting, as we've seen. The prevalence was usually around 1.9, 1.5%. Sorry. And then UNHCR used the moment that we were experiencing with a growing interest in having the Washington Group questions used in humanitarian settings, and the Global Disability Summit, we made a commitment on integrating the Washington Group questions. Now, how did we do it? It was a bit challenging. We see, again, I know it's a very small sized screenshots of how our database looks like, and how the disability module looks like, but I will highlight with tax how did we integrated the questions, just for lessons learned sharing, and for interested if other entities are undergoing through similar processes. So we included the 6 Washington Group questions, and we included 2 additional questions from the extended set and adapted from the child functioning set on behavior and upper body mobility. Those came through consultations with our data users, where they wanted to have more questions to support identifying persons with psychosocial disabilities, and having more details as well in terms of people who would require additional support because of upper body mobility issues, and usually related to the conflicts, and displacement situations. We included both the questions for children and for adults, so they are included in when people are activating or looking for a code. The answers are reflected with the recommended cutoff. There was a problem. We could not include the 4 answer categories because activating those that would not be the recommended cutoff would activate the code, and that would not be in line with the recommended cutoff in itself. It's a bit technically challenging, but that was a limitation that we experienced. Another limitation is that the codes should appear first. So all staff is being trained, and we are doing rollouts of these changes, and we develop training materials to train them in the Washington Group approach in itself. But there is a slight methodological change where to ask the questions, actually they won't see the questions first, they will see the code. So they will have to go code by code and adding and asking the questions. This is again a technical limitation of the website that we were using the app. they will have to open multiple records for multiple difficulties. It doesn't mean that we will have double counting, but for one person, if that person answers different categories or has several difficulties, there should be different records that would be open for that. There was a discussion on removing mentions to assistive devices in coordination with our colleagues working on health, and using or based on the recommendation of the possibility of removing the questions or that part on even if wearing glasses or even using a hearing aid for some of the questions. There was an interest, well, first, there was an assumption that those devices would be very rarely available in context of deprivation and forced displacement. And second, that people who may have lost them would have an opportunity to express that. Considering that the objective of this module is really to identify people who require the immediate support, right? So that was another of the areas that was as well recommended. And then we use the official translations, and we have messages for our staff to use always to contact us and collaborate with the Washington group if they want to translate the modules. Now, this is how they look, the change, and we have a picture of an interview happening in a displacement setting. Now, these changes will require time. Our staff is accepting those. We have thousands of users within UNHCR, and then 1/3 of our users, more or less, are external partners who are collecting data, including sometimes NGOs, but as well other partners. The way our staff and other partners were used to identify persons with disabilities was pre-identifying impairments using visual cues, so usually people with more visual impairments, and then assigning a code based on these assumptions. Now they will have to be asking questions, collecting answers, and the codes will be assigned. This requires time. Our staff is still looking at people to whom they will ask questions. So this is something that will require some time. We've collected some data already since July. The slide represents two graphics with disabilities by difficulty level, and then the top country operations that have been more active collecting data on disabilities, with starting from the country where most codes have been included are Jordan, Lebanon, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, Ecuador, Colombia, Mexico, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Sudan. These numbers are still low because, well, those are only new entries, new registers. There is a recommendation of in verification processes where we revisit data and we revisit households of persons who have been displaced to reassess the persons using the code. So we will have more data in the future, but just I wanted to show that the data that we would be using and the analysis would be somehow different. And to end up with the presentation, just to say or share that this is not the only effort to improve data on disability and monitoring disability inclusion. We have indicators that are targeted to identify a percentage of persons of concern to UNHCR with disabilities who receive services for their specific needs. Then there's a mandatory disaggregation request for impact and outcome indicators using age, sex, and disability. And we have a disability marker as well at the programmatic level for actions that contribute to disability inclusion. This data is usually reported on the right side. There are some of the more recent reports that where disability or data on persons with disabilities is shared. And well, the feedback that we've received, sometimes it has more questions that require follow-up, but there's also positive feedback on the public commitment we made. There's feedback on people who were involved in the consultations that led to that commitment, who are saying that it's really good to see that this change has taken place. And well, there's just some resources available, and I guess these slides will be shared with all. Thank you, and I'll stay in case there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ricardo, for that insightful presentation on how UNHCR is using Washington Group tools. Now, I know we have got some questions, so I'll open the floor for questions before we call upon the next presenter. So any question to Ricardo? You can also ask the questions through the chat. Do we have a hand?
I see Mario.
Mario?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Ricardo, for the presentation. A question related to education and emergencies and the database that you have. I just wanted to understand to what extent the information in the database that informs those programs on education that UNHCR is implementing in refugee settings, but also like in displacement situations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mario. So as I shared, these codes are within Progress V4, which is the central case management data collection tool. Now, if operations having activities on education are using V4 as the, let's say, the building block for their data, and they are they are registering children and then using this database as the basic building block, then it would apply. If not, if they're using separate databases, which is sometimes the case, it wouldn't apply. It would happen the same for other type of surveys, other type of data collection efforts at programmatic level, etc. Those that are not connected with the central database would not be informed. But progressively, we are encouraging all our operations to use when it is relevant. That is the problem, right? That in some cases it is not relevant to use Progress, but when it is relevant, that they are using the module. So hopefully there would be data on education in the future as well.
And thanks very much for that. I hope you've been answered. Any other question?
Hi, it's Claire here from Stats NZ. I just wanted to ask you about your question. You said you included a question about emotions and behavior. So was that taking one of the questions from the child functioning set, and were you applying that to adults as well as children? Did you make any changes to that question?
No, it is the question for children. You're right. Is the question on the child functioning module applied to adults? There was a pushback on using the questions on I think they're called affect, right? So anxiety and depression. Given that there was a well, anecdotal based assumption that the questions would not work in the context of emergency registration and forced displacement, given that first it would be difficult to understand them, and second, many people would have could be reporting those symptoms, let's say, or answering affirmatively to those questions. So the question on emotions was identified as more adequate. It is something that needs further work. We are starting to use it, and we are monitoring with our colleagues working on mental health as well within UNHCR, and with the support of the Washington Group, how it's going to be performing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll give chance to the last person in case we have any other question. And I've seen Head has shared the link to access the Save the Children studies. So all of us are free to copy the link. Any other question to Ricardo? it seems we have got no more questions for you. Thank you very much for the presentation and for answering the questions. So next, we'll welcome our next presenter, who is Mario. So Mario will share with us how they are using the tools to address emergencies that are arising in the education sector. Welcome, Mario.
Thanks a lot for the introduction, and thanks to Ricardo for his presentation. I'm going to try to share the screen. I've been having some difficulties lately, so let's try this out and see if it works. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yes, you can.
Okay, that's great. Can you hear me well as well?
Yeah, you're clear.
Okay, that's great. So thanks again for inviting Education Cannot Wait to this annual meeting of the Washington Group. And I'll focus, as Ricardo did in his presentation, on emergency settings and protected crisis. But in this case, I'll focus particularly on education in emergencies. And I'll basically just provide and share the experience from Education Cannot Wait, which is the United Nations Fund on Education in Emergencies. And how basically we are working with the Washington Group tool, but more generally on how basically we are collecting data on children with disabilities. And in the presentation, I'll first focus on who we are, just to give an overview for those who do not know Education Cannot Wait, which will be useful for the second part of the presentation, which is about how basically we are collecting data on children with disabilities, and also how we're gonna basically enhance the use and uptake of the Washington Group's tool. So in the next slide, I mean, like this one is just like a brief overview of, about Education Cannot Wait, which I mentioned is a fund, and we fund programs on education in emergencies. And we were established in the aftermath of the World Humanitarian Summit in 2016. And the idea behind creating a fund for education in emergencies was, first of all, to basically galvanize support and mobilize resources for education in emergencies, given that education represents like a very small share of the resources that go into the humanitarian system. And the other idea behind creating this fund was basically to address some of the systemic bottlenecks that affect the sector, education in emergencies. And this includes the lack of quality data on education and children's learning. And the way we work, given that we are a fund, is that we do not implement program ourselves, but we fund basically organizations that work in crisis, protracted crisis and emergencies. And therefore, our idea is that local partners will implement programs that we fund. And this includes the UN, international NGOs, and local partners too. And the two main vehicles that we leverage to implement our programs are called the First Emergency Response, which aims to respond to basically like sudden onset crisis or escalation of existing crisis, which can entail, for instance, refugee movement or displacement, disasters, and so on and so forth. And this is like a short-term response. It's 1 year. Whereas the other program that we usually fund, it's called the Multi-Year Resilience Program. And the idea of this program is to respond to short-term needs, but also to bridge the gap with those in the medium and long term. And to do this, basically, we work with development actors, humanitarian actors, as well as with the government to basically just have a broader and a more comprehensive response in the education system. And what you see in this slide on the right, basically like you have a map that shows the countries where we have worked in 2020. This is like a map from our annual results report, which was published in September this year. And it shows that basically we covered over 2020, including COVID response, 34 different countries from Latin America to Asia. And we fund basically 29 different organizations that are implementing basically these programs in 34 countries. And as of 2020, so cumulative.
Ce jour, c'est cumulatif et donc on a 142 subventions actives à l'heure actuelle. Et donc, vous pouvez le voir que ce groupe a suggéré qu'il y avait un plein potentiel pour la collecte des informations et les meilleures pratiques qui ont été faites pour répondre en cas d'urgence. Et pour nous, pour collecter les données, les formations et tout qui a été fait dans le cadre de ce qui a été expérimenté. Donc, les données d'abord sur les filles, les garçons et les filles ayant des handicaps au sein de l'ECW. Donc, on l'a fait avec le programme. Donc, l'exposé rationnel, ça a été de le faire en équité avec, dans le cadre des résultats qui a été donné avec le CW, donc ce que les gens doivent apprendre exactement et donc voir ce qui est dans l'éducation. On a vu du point de vue pratique.
And disaggregation, because as part of our results framework, we do basically monitor the number of children that we reach disaggregated by disability. And the issue, let's say, in our case, which is different from the work of UNHCR, is that we do not implement ourselves the programs. Therefore, that means that we deal with a plethora of partners who, which basically may use different tools, different approaches, and even within the same organization that might work in two different countries, these two different countries may use different tools and data. And this, I mean, like results, as Ricardo also mentioned, in undercounting, which is a problem in terms of statistics. But then we also have like another issue which is more programmatic, which is safeguarding. So that means that we have children in school and we don't know basically their difficulties. And this is quite problematic, particularly in the context where we operate, given that these are emergencies and protracted crises. And therefore, what we aim to do as an organization basically is just to move towards basically more comparable data that will allow us to aggregate more, let's say, thorough information, because at the moment we are basically aggregating data on children with disabilities from different organizations that are using different tools. And in terms of programming, having this information that comes, for instance, from tools like the Washington Group tools, it's fundamental for us because it gives us information also on the diversity of the children with disability that we reach. And therefore, this could also inform programming. And this tension between statistical use and the programmatic use was also highlighted yesterday by Jennifer, but also during the presentation that was given by Humanity and Inclusion. And in order to get to this point where we have comparable data that can be easily aggregated, of course, we have to basically just leverage this idea of harmonizing the approaches that are used by the partners that we fund. And before going to this harmonization effort, basically what we have done within Education Cannot Wait was to map basically what are the practices of the partners that we fund through our programs. And we did basically two things. One was to look again at all the program documents that we received. So these are the proposals and the programs that then we end up funding, both multi-year resilience programs and first emergency response. And the second part, the second action actually was to focus on basically to share like a request for information, basically to contact countries and to ask information on how they were collecting data on children with disabilities and the tools that they use. And we focus on programs that were approved in 2020 and were still ongoing as of September 21. And we ended up with 21 programs. You can see it on in the box on the left-hand side of the slide. 12 multi-year resilience programs and 9 first emergency response, which covered 17 countries. Now you will see that there's a mismatch between the number of programs and the number of countries, because oftentimes we, for instance, go in a country, fund a first emergency response, which then triggers a multi-year resilience program. And that's why we have like a higher number of programs compared to the number of countries. And with these 17 countries that we covered in our request for information, basically we are covering half of those that we supported in 2020. And on these 21 programs, there were 42 partners that were implementing them across the 17 countries. But if we look at unique partners, that means that, for instance, UNICEF might be implementing a program in more than one country, the same for UNHCR. That means that we got information, or we wanted to get information from 13 partners that we are funding. And the response rate was, okay, let's say it was actually quite good, let's say. And we have, let's say, We're covering most of the countries that we contacted, and then most of the unique partners that we contacted, even though, I mean, like, not everybody answered, but that was to be expected, let's say. And in the slides, these are basically like the results from the two main questions that we asked. And one question was about data, what kind of data they were using. And the other one was about the kind of questions they used to collect this data. And going first to the kind of data, we asked partners whether they were collecting new data or they were using existing data. And the percentage in the y-axis represents basically the percentage of partners that responded to our survey. So total partners rather than unique partners. And there's, let's say, a tendency in our program, of course, to collect new data when it comes to children with disabilities. But of course, in multi-year resilience programs, which last for 3 years, this tendency is a bit stronger than post-emergency response, where there's also a greater share of partners that are using existing data. Now, if we move then to the right-hand side of the slide, and we look at the kind of questions that have been used to collect this data, there is a variety of methods. What we gathered is that basically nobody's using like screening tools to basically identify children with disabilities, but then there's a wide array of tools that they are using. A third of the respondents are using the Washington Group tools, and these go from the short set to the child functioning module to the enhanced short set. And in one case, it was also quite interesting. I think that was Ethiopia in response to the crisis that arose in Tigray. The use of the inclusive education module, which was shared and presented yesterday by UNICEF. So that's quite groundbreaking because that's not being used much. It's still being piloted, but it's being used in this setting. But we can still see that there is like a third of the respondents that are using this by-site approach that Ricardo just described in the previous presentation, and which skews the kind of data that you get towards physical disabilities. And this tendency, let's say, is stronger in multi-year resilience program, as we can see from the graph on the right at the bottom of the presentation. And whereas in multi-year resilience programs, whereas in first emergency response, I mean, we still have partners that are using like a list of medical conditions to basically categorize children as children with disabilities. And then we have like partners, just I think one that use like a yes or no questions. And then the other group represents basically partners that are using the Washington Group tool, but they are adapting the tool. For instance, there was one partner that was using the child functioning module, but was actually asking questions to adolescents themselves. So use self-report rather than asking information to the caregiver, but those were adolescents, so 12 and above. And of course, I mean, like at the moment, it's quite fragmented and it's still quite diverse in terms of what kind of data we are getting from our partners. But the idea is to basically use the next 3 years to move towards like this harmonized data collection. I mean, harmonized use of tools, and the Washington Group tools are those that we are basically championing. And basically, we are putting in place a strategy to enhance the use and uptake of the child functioning module particularly. And the first step, which is like in the short term, is to work with the countries that are developing new programs starting from next year. And basically just to ensure that when they develop the programs, if data are not available, then they budget and they add in the proposal the use of the child functioning module to collect data. And this can also be the case in the context where data exists, but these data have not been collected by the child functioning module. So this is what Education Cannot Wait can do directly in dialogue with the partner. And to ensure that we do this systematically, this commitment will be part of a policy on disability inclusion that we are going to basically we are currently developing, and we will launch before the Global Disability Summit in February 2022. So this will ensure that this is systematized and we are accountable for our basically commitments to data and the use of the Washington Group tool. And then the third step to ensure that the operationalization at the country level is basically easier, and also partners have a tool that they can use. We are funding, and that was presented yesterday by Humanitarian Inclusion, a pilot on the use of the child functioning module teacher version in emergency settings. And this will be useful for us to test, to basically answer quite a few questions, including like what kind of domains the teachers are best suited to answer. Including, like, for instance, those on psychosocial disabilities, but also then what is the influence of gender, the understanding of gender on how basically the teachers rate and assess their children, likewise on attitudes towards disability. And this effort that is just focused on one country, it's linked to like the creation of the new Washington Group subgroup on the child functioning module teacher version. And the idea is that basically this subgroup can provide a way to have like a greater geographical coverage, but at the same time it's a group that can provide like a place for knowledge sharing on designs, but also on evidence, such that we can come to a common understanding, and also sharing evidence on how and whether this tool can work in emergency settings, but also in other settings that are not necessarily in emergency. And the other work that we will do with global partners entail work with the Global Education Cluster, which is basically like the coordinating entity in the humanitarian architecture that provide, let's say, information, but also capacity development to those who are operating on education and emergencies at the country level. And the work here will focus more like on needs assessment related to education and the use of the Washington Group tool in this area. And the last area of work, which I mean, like, we'll have to just start to complete a new stream of work next year, so it's to be developed, is about like the linkage between the education and emergency data that we collect in our programs and how this might basically be connected, linked, and included in education management information system. And at the moment, we are funding an initiative that is led by UNESCO, which focuses on like the institutional framework, which allows this linkages to be done. Because I mean, it's not an issue, only technical issue of data, but it's oftentimes it's also like a matter of the policy that the country where we work has in place when it comes to, for instance, refugees, internal displacement, and how basically then these children receive education, what kind of education, and so on and so forth. So I mean, like it's a long way forward, but we are quite hopeful. And from the next year with our policy, as well as like with the steps that I laid out, we are just trying to champion it more, like the use of the Washington Group tools. And thank you so much for your attention. And just let me know if there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mario, for enlightening us on what you people do, because personally, it's the first time I'm getting about what you people are doing, and I know I'm not the only one. So I'll open this session for a few questions because we are far much behind the schedule. So maybe 2 questions before we wind up. Any question? Maybe Head, you can assist in case you see any hand up.
Thank you, Renice. For the moment, there don't seem to be any questions in the chat box, but if you do have any questions, please ask them.
It seems people are tired, or maybe we didn't understand what Mario presented, or
well, maybe while people are thinking, we can launch. We have some polls on this topic that we wanted to ask you about, and so maybe this will get some ideas flowing in case you think of some questions for Mario. So let me do that right now. So the first question, provided that you are here in representation of the National Statistical Office, is if your NSO is involved in gathering data in humanitarian crises and emergency situations. So we'll just give a couple of maybe 1 minute to respond to that question. Okay, about 20 more seconds to have this poll open. You can respond if you are here in representation of a National Statistical Office, whether your NSO is involved in gathering data in humanitarian crises and emergency situations. What we see for now of 24 countries or 24 representatives that have participated is that the vast majority is not involved in data collection in this type of setting. So we will end the poll now. We see that the vast majority of those who responded are not involved in this type of data collection. We'll now launch the second poll, which is mainly, I guess, for those of you who responded affirmatively to that question, and it's whether your NSO is involved in gathering disability data in this type of setting. Again, here we'll give 1 minute for the answers to come in. So far, the respondents, the 19 respondents, are all responding 21 at this point, all responding negatively. So it doesn't seem that this is an active area of activity for the National Statistical Offices. Right now, we have about 22 countries responding, all of them saying that they are not involved in this type of data collection. We'll end the poll and share results. The results were unanimous in not using or not gathering data on disability in this type of setting. And the final question, which is more open to all, is to ask what should the next steps be in advancing the work on the use of the Washington Group tools in humanitarian crises and emergencies. So here, this poll, we would like to know from you what your thoughts are on what the Washington Group should be doing, if anything, on advancing the work in this area. So you have some choices there. Please let us know. And again, here we'll give about 30 more seconds. So please let us know what you think about this. And this question is more open, not only to the NSOs, but to other partners who are also joining us today. Okay, just a couple of more seconds to leave this poll open, so please get your responses in. We have about half the people participating, just a couple of more. All right, I'll end the poll and share the results with you. So what we see is that the category that received the most responses was to develop a guidance note on this topic. As the Washington Group doesn't do work specifically in this area, this guidance note would probably have to be developed in conjunction with our partners. So that is something we take note of. Another common response was to hold an informational session to share experiences. So this is something we also take note of. So thank you very much for those who participated in the polls. And we will now turn to the last session of today's meeting, and that is session number 8. And it is a session of a brief partner presentation, and Nicolás Petreschi of INDEC Argentina will moderate that session. So Nicolás, over to you.
Thank you very much, Heidi. Hello, everyone. This is our last session, as Heidi said. We have our partner presentation. In this case, I would like to introduce Elizabeth Lockwood. She's CBM representative at the United Nations, CBM Global Disability Inclusion. Also, she is representing the stakeholders group of persons with disabilities. Her presentation is entitled Innovative Data Partnership to Build Capacity in and Increase the Quality of Disability Data. Elizabeth, thank you for joining us today and for the support provided to the Washington Group activities. Please, Elizabeth, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you, Nicolas. And thank you so much to the Washington Group for inviting us today. We're very pleased to be here. As you all know, I'm not using a PowerPoint also, and this will be brief. And then I realize it's the last presentation. We are, as everybody knows, we do not have enough disability data. And this is something that has been particularly evident in the COVID pandemic. And furthermore, we learned just last week that out of the 231 global SDG indicators, out of which there are 213 available data, only 5 can be disaggregated by disability. So this is also highlighting this dire lack of disability data. It is projected there will be 4 more indicators that can be disaggregated, but it's not until 2023. So we really are quite behind. And I'm focusing today on partnerships, innovative data partnerships, which I think are key in addressing these gaps. One key aspect of these partnerships is to ensure organizations of persons with disabilities are at the table in all of these key data processes and that they have a leading role. We have a great example that I will talk about today, the data partnership between the stakeholder group of persons with disabilities, the International Disability Alliance, and CBM Global, my organization. We launched a comprehensive disability data advocacy toolkit. We launched this in 2020 because we found there was a need from organizations of persons with disabilities that they wanted capacity to understand how to use data, how to advocate for data and better data, and how to advocate using data. We have created this and have shared it, and it is also includes the Washington Group tools, which is very important. We have it available in English, French, Spanish, easy read, international sign, and Arabic is coming within a week, which is very exciting. We have included in the toolkit case studies of advocacy efforts around data, such as using citizen-generated data to collect data on marginalized groups to measure SDGs, working with local authorities to ensure that we complement the official statistics and work together. And it's a great example of a partnership as well. And very excitingly, the toolkit has, building on the toolkit, we have a partnership, CBM Global, with the UNFPA in close collaboration with the stakeholder group, International Disability Alliance, and the national and regional organizations of persons with disabilities in the Pacific and Asia region, including Pacific Disability Forum. And this was really to build on the data capacity of the region. And this is going on right now. It's very exciting. And we really are using this to understand the data better in that region. We found that there is no clear cross-regional analysis of the inclusion of disability data in census and large-scale household surveys. And we have 3 overarching objectives to this project. There is a data mapping and report, and it's very exciting. It's a regional report on the status of disability data in the region, and the evidence is from a review and analysis of recent disability data across different Asia Pacific countries, summarizing the availability and quality of data against key indicators, including the Sustainable Development Goal indicators, some of them, and also some in-chain strategy indicators, and also with recommendations on ways forward. It's very interesting. We have a draft summary so far. It's very interesting. And the second part of the evidence comes from persons with disabilities and their representative organizations and their experiences with data initiatives and processes through a narrative inquiry. This is sort of complementing that first piece of evidence. The second aspect, which is very exciting from my perspective, especially, is a data advocacy workshops specifically for organizations of persons with disabilities, but also for NSOs and UNFPA staff and NGOs and others, really to start a dialogue on disability data and building capacity. There are 8 modules, starting with understanding data, and this includes the Washington Group tools. And then there is another aspect on how to create an advocacy plan to work with data and advocate for data, how to talk to NSOs. The first workshops are being piloted next week in Samoa, and then the week after in Nepal. And we are very excited about getting the feedback, which we will share once we know more. And the third piece is resources. We will take these trainings and publicly share them so everybody can use them. We will present lessons learned and how to build on this, maybe for a second level of training, to work with OPDs, to work with NSOs and others in the region and elsewhere. So we hope to continue this partnership and also the partnership with the Washington Group. And I'm happy to share the link of the toolkit in the chat box. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I don't know if it's any question. The thing that it comes to my mind, it's the importance of sharing the different initiatives and try to aggregate them and to avoid overlapping and to sum up them all and bring something new and something better. That was the thing that I understood from your presentation. Heidi, I don't know if there's any questions, or we can just, we have a Mario with he raised his hand.
Thanks, Nicholas, and thanks a lot, Elizabeth. Just a very basic question. Do you also cover emergency settings with this? Because it would be quite interesting on the side of the strengthening of capacities of OPDs. Thank you.
That's a very good question. We haven't yet, but we do plan on having a second level, and I think this would be an excellent piece to put in. Thank you.
Yeah, please be in touch. Would be interesting.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anna, do you want to jump in? No. Okay. Okay. If there's no, I watching this. Okay. Well, Heidi, I think that we are on time. Thank you
so
again,
much.
Elizabeth.
Thank you, Nicolas. Thank you, Elizabeth. I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to the chat because Elizabeth has placed there a link to the advocacy toolkit. And I think this is a topic which is generating a lot of interest. We get a lot of requests at the Washington Group Secretariat related to this. So familiarize yourself with that resource. So this concludes our second day of the 21st meeting of the Washington Group on Disability Statistics. Before we close, I just wanted to remind you, please, that tomorrow the first session will be the UNICEF launch session. So you must have registered separately for that event. And that event begins at 8 o'clock. It's scheduled to run from 8 to 9:30. However, if it runs over, we will begin our Washington Group sessions at 9:30 on the dot, because we also have some material that we need to cover in our final day of the meeting. So please join us for both of those things. We look forward to seeing you again and having, again, a lively discussion. So thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Heidi.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Jennifer. Let me say, Jennifer, that it was a little unfair that you were the representative of one regional group we we would like to have you in our session or our main session.
You are very sweet. Next time I'll go to your group. I did say that you could be a member of more than one group, so. Have a good day, everybody.